What is good, everybody, man? Let me know if y'all can hear me, man. We had to push the recap back a night. I was busy traveling last night. Also wanted to put together the highlight tape from the Southern Heritage Classic that I filmed from up above, man. I heard the stream was bad. I went back and watched the version of the game. I don't know if it was the same stream that you guys had to endure throughout the game, but I heard it was bad, and so I'm glad I could give you guys a little bit of content. Also, had to get my top 25 out and things like that. So appreciate y'all supporting the channel, man. The support behind the channel these past few weeks has been amazing to watch, and the way that this channel has grown in just the past 2 weeks has really been something I've been really grateful to have. So I definitely appreciate you guys, man, and everything I've been able to do, coaches calls, traveling, covering games, voting in the top 25, man. It's all due to you guys, man. So I wanted to give you all a shout out first. Now, call-in numbers already up there, man. But man, we got a lot to talk about tonight. We're gonna recap some of the top games across the FCS in week two. We're of course going to talk about the Southern Heritage Classic, which I was at this weekend in Memphis, and I, got some footage, got to talk to some people, got to see that game up close and personal, and I got a lot of thoughts on it. I'm really interested to see what how you guys feel about the game right now. Also, we're going to break down my top 25 that I submitted today for the FCS Stats Perform Top 25 poll, and I'll also debuting a new series on the recaps called Players of the Week, and I'm going to give you guys 3 offensive and 3 defensive players of the week from across the FCS. I'm going to make graphics that I'm probably going to drop tomorrow. So I wanted to try to incorporate some new segments, man. I told you guys we're going to try to take this thing to the next level this year, man. But we already got our first caller, so let me get to them. Y'all let me know if y'all can hear the caller when they get on the line. 931, you're live. Um, it's pretty impactful, especially when you look at how bad Kennesaw State has looked and the fact that Jacksonville State's not eligible to win the conference title. So I think right now you could take a step back and say Eastern Kentucky and Austin P look like the two best teams. But hang on, they said they didn't hear you real quick. Let me change this up. All right, caller, ask your question again, and that way they can hear you. Let me make sure they can hear y'all. Did y'all hear his question this time? But like I said, I think you can make an argument that Austin P and Eastern Kentucky are the two best teams in the ASUN right now. And that 7 overtime game was won. Man, they still can't hear you. What is going on here? Hang on. I don't know why. All right, man. Hang on. I'm gonna get you to call right back in. I'm gonna reboot the call line, man. Just call right back in. All right, we're gonna reboot this thing. I don't know why. All right, you're live again, man. Oh, I know why they can hear you. Here we go. All right, now we got it fixed. I know for a fact. So his question was, so we don't have to repeat it again, is how big was the Eastern Kentucky upset over Bowling Green? And I think it was huge. The big question for the ASUN was they have to share an automatic bid with the WAC. Um, so the that FBS win could be the reason they get the automatic bid if they win their conference over a Kennesaw State who I believe who just got blown out by Cincinnati. Now Cincinnati is a better FBS team, but that still probably holds weight with the committee. So Eastern Kentucky needed that game, and Eastern Kentucky looked very impressive. And when you compare that to last week, they lost by 6 to another FBS team. So Eastern Kentucky, in my opinion, is a top 15 team, and that's why it reflected in my rankings this week.
Mhm. Okay. And another thing for Jackson State, we've seen two extremes of them. Well, two times. We've seen Jackson State beat somebody 59-3 and 16-3. I know that speaks volumes about their defense, but how far do you think that would take them? Who is the biggest threat in the SWAC to beat Jackson State?
In the SWAC, I think you still got to go with Southern, even though we don't know much about them. You know, we didn't learn anything week one. When you play in AIA school and put up 86, I didn't learn anything about the team against LSU. I don't know if there's any big takeaways. They put up 17 points, but it was really against the backups. And I want to see Southern this weekend against Texas Southern. In my opinion, they're the better team. They have the better coaching staff. They need to go out there and look dominant against Texas Southern. And if they do that, I think they establish themselves as the biggest threat. Now, the other one that's a sleeper, in my opinion, I think Alcorn's a team to look at. And they didn't look super impressive against Tulane. Tulane really took. They looked a lot better this weekend than I thought they were, but Alcorn looked great against Stephen F. Austin. And I think throughout the season, by the end of the season, if Aaron Allen can really develop his game, Alcorn State could be a complete team, especially with the way they run the football and how good their defense has looked in their FCS game this season. But Alcorn State and Southern would be my two picks right now because everybody else has way too many question marks.
Okay, one more question, then I'll let you go. How much merit do we put behind Grambling State's recent win in blowout fashion?
Okay, I put a little bit. One, the reason I don't give them a lot of credit is because I don't think Northwestern State's very good. That's a team who just got beat almost 50 to nothing by, I think it was Montana the, the week before. They just, they're probably going to finish in one of the bottom two spots of the Southland. That was the game where I thought Grambling had more talent. And I said before the game, if if he doesn't if Hugh and Grambling don't win that game by double digits, that's a bad look for Grambling. It's going to be a long season, and God forbid if they would have lost that game. But they came out, they ran the ball well. Hawkins looked great at QB. The defense played opportunistic. I thought Grambling looked great, so I give them a little bit of credit because things could have really went off the rails after that week one loss to Arkansas State. But I still want to see how they look against a good team like like a Jackson State this weekend.
All right, thank you, man. Thank you for answering my question.
Hey, appreciate you, man. So we got that early caller in. But man, let's get into this top 25. I already submitted it, man. Of course, the FCS stats came out earlier today already, man. You can go check it out on the FCS stats website. If you want a more in-depth breakdown, I have this on my website and I have like a whole notes and analysis section on why I chose how I did in my top 25. But some of the biggest moves, man. Montana jumped South Dakota State to number two. I think over the I think over the first few weeks of the season, you can argue Montana's looked a little bit better than South Dakota State. A 2-point win over UC Davis for the Jackrabbits last week. Montana went out there and smacked around South Dakota. I think their biggest question mark coming into the season was quarterback, and Lucas Johnson has looked every bit the part of what you need him to as a quarterback for the Grizz. So right now, I think Montana is a better team than South Dakota State, so I moved them up a spot. North Dakota State 43-3 win over A&T. We'll talk about that game in a little bit. They stay number one. Montana State sticks at 4. One of my biggest movers, Incarnate Word, jumps to number 5. And I'm going to tell y'all, I really debated on moving them into the top 4. Incarnate Word, in my opinion, has been the most impressive team in the FCS this season thus far on the field. And they get a 55 to 41 win over Nevada, following up a 60 to 20 something team, a 60 something to 20 something win last week over Southern Illinois. Incarnate Word looks legit, man. And this weekend they play PV in an interesting game. And I asked Bubba McDowell in the press conference about this game. I'm gonna drop the press conference probably later tonight or tomorrow. Uh, Incarnate Word. Next week after PV, they play Southeastern Louisiana on the road. That's a big game, but right now Incarnate Word looks like the best team in the Southland, and it might not be close. And so Incarnate Word, it was one of the biggest movers, man. That's a top 5 team based on the field performance. When you can go up there and put up 55 points on an FBS team and absolutely just smack them around all game long, Incarnate Word gets my full respect, man. And that's the only reason Missouri State drops to 6. They had a big win over UT Martin. Delaware stays at 7. They beat Delaware State 35-9. Sacramento State only drops due to some teams that have looked better. They had a bye week in week 2. I mean, listen, Sacramento State to have a bye week in week 2, I understand it. That they didn't lose yet. They're 1-0, but to me, with Incarnate Word and Delaware looking so good over these first 2 weeks, Sacramento State just kind of dropped by default. Same for Villanova. They beat Long Island this weekend, and Jackson State's at 10. They dropped one spot because I had Incarnate Word behind Jackson State last week. And so, due to Incarnate Word moving up, Jackson State by default had to move down a spot to number 10. I still think Jackson State's a top 10 team in the country, but until they prove more, I couldn't put them any higher than 10. Holy Cross jumps to 11. They beat Buffalo on a Hail Mary 37-31, one of the 4 FBS wins of the weekend for the FCS. Weber State jumps to 12. They had arguably the most impressive FBS win of the season, 35-7 win over Utah State. It was impressive, man. Weber State looks like the real deal in the Big Sky, and they're going to compete on a very, very high level. Now, Chattanooga at 13, they just dropped by default because of how good some of these top teams played. Eastern Kentucky, we just talked about them, jumps to 14, a 59-57, 7 overtime win over Bowling Green. William and Mary to 15. They had a 37-21 win over Campbell in impressive fashion. They're 2-0 with an FBS win. William and Mary was also a big mover in my poll. Eastern Washington drops a little bit after their loss to Oregon. Mercer on a bye week, 1-1. They stick at about 17. Rhode Island is a newcomer to the poll. They had a 35-21 win over Bryant. They have an in-conference win, 35-14 over Stony Brook week 1. They beat a really, really talented Bryant team that was 1 point away from pulling off an FBS upset last week. Rhode Island jumped to 18 in my poll this week. And I think last week they were like 26, and Rhode Island is legit, man. I'm excited to see what they look like in the CAA. UT Martin drops to 19 after their loss to Missouri State. Austin P is a newcomer, man. Listen, they're 2-1. They had a 41-0 win over Valley. It could have been 60 something to nothing. It was, listen, Delelio at quarterback is the real deal, man. He had 5 first half touchdowns against Valley. Their last 2 games, now given the opponents weren't the greatest, is almost they've outscored the last 2 opponents over 100-0 and came within one possession of beating an FBS team in week 0. Austin P is legit in my book. They have a chance to go 3-1 this weekend with a win over Alabama A&M on the road. So that'll be a big test for them to have to go in to face the Bulldogs this weekend. North Dakota jumps in after beating Northern Iowa last week. They're 1-1 with an FBS loss. Richmond, a big win over St. Francis, falls at 22. Northern Arizona. Now, this is a team that I wasn't on my radar up until this week. Northern Arizona came in this week and beat Sam Houston State, who I consider a FBS 0.5 win because they have the 85 scholarships, even though Sam Houston is competing at the FCS level this year. They went out against Sam Houston State, who was supposed to have an explosive offense, and held them to 3 points. That is insane, man. A 10-3 win over Sam Houston State for Northern Arizona. I love RJ Martinez and Kevin Daniels at the quarterback and running back spot for them. The Big Sky is going to be a bloodbath this year, but right now on the field, I can only base on what's happened on the field right now, man. Northern Arizona is a top 25 team. North Carolina Central moves up one spot from 25 to 24, a 41-0 win over Winston-Salem State. They're going to have some of their biggest games coming up in the season, but based on their first 2 weeks, I think they deserve a spot in this top 25. And Stanford's at 25. They lost to Georgia, but they looked better against Georgia than Oregon did. It was only a 33-0 loss. Sanford knocks off Kennesaw State week one. I thought Sanford belonged at 25 here, man. So this is my top 25. Let me get to some of these comments and see how you guys are feeling about this. Um, let's see. I mean, right now, K Lofton, none of the SWAC teams have done anything to deserve any top 25 respect. Outside of Jackson State, nobody has looked good in out of conference. I mean, Alabama State potentially has, but they had a one possession win over a D2 team in week two after beating Howard. And outside of them, I mean, I guess you could say PV, but they just lost to Abilene Christian. So I can't put them in there. I mean, you can say none of the SWAC teams get respect, but nobody but Jackson State has earned any respect in terms of on the field yet. I mean, FAMU squeaked by a D2 team and has got the doors blown off the first 2 weeks. So I don't think you can say SWAC teams don't get respect, man. If they start winning out of conference games and start winning on the field, then they could be in here, just like Central did, and that's why they're in the fray. And South Carolina State was an honorable mention for me, but I need to see them do it over someone other than Bethune Cookman. Let's see. It's safe to, man. ETSU looked horrible this week, man. ETSU looked atrocious, and so that's why they dropped all the way out. They dropped from 11 to unranked, and so I think they looked that bad, man. And for me, early preseason polls, in my opinion, you should be comfortable enough as a voter to move teams a large amount because preseason rankings are largely based on potentially what happened the year before and projections. If that team goes out there and doesn't look good, I have no problem moving them out. I have 3 teams that were in the top 10 of my preseason rankings that are no longer, up there. So I think more voters need to be transparent about, you know, you got to be transparent. Listen, Stephen F. Austin, ETSU, and Kennesaw State all dropped out of my rankings, and they were all preseason top 10s. I think you have to be honest with yourself when teams were just when teams are just overrated going into the preseason. And so ETSU was one of those teams. Cardinate Word dropped 55 on Nevada G. I mean, I'm telling you, it was impressive. Utah State was clearly decimated after playing Alabama, played like they did not want to be there. Man, and Utah State was a team that I think people were looking at potentially to win their conference, man, and they just got blitzed, man, by Weber State. It was impressive. Let's see, where's FAMU? Israel, you are out of pocket for that. I get to see in person how dominant NDSU can be. Want to see what they do against Arizona. Who is retooling with some good young talent. So glad to see my Eagles in the top 25. I agree, man. Listen, call in number is there, man. Call in if you got any questions. We're about to get to our players of the week here. The Big Sky Conference is clearly the best. UT Martin also looks good. Also understand why UIW isn't above Montana, but they definitely look better. Maybe it's just they're exciting. For me, the only reason I didn't move them above Montana State is I tried to look at it from a completely neutral perspective because UIW, in my opinion, like I said, has been the most impressive team. It's just on one hand, was Southern Illinois overrated? Because Southern Illinois went out there and lost to Southeast Missouri State this weekend too. So sitting at 0-2, I don't know. I don't know if I can move them to 4 for that win because as the season moves along, that win may not look as impressive as it does now. If Southern Illinois would have won last week, I think I probably would have had UIW at 4 or 3. But just due to the question mark surrounding Southern Illinois, I kept UIW at 5. That's showing them the respect I think they deserve without overrating them before they've played some of these top FCS teams that are going to be coming up on their schedule. Man, we're going to talk about all the massive upsets. We are going to talk about all the massive upsets. Do not worry. Ark State is better than everyone thinks they are. Grambling is better than what people think they are. Well, we're going to talk about Grambling too. Don't worry about that. Let's see what other team in the HBCU space should be ranked. Curious. I say none. That's for old boy, not you. Okay, that's what I was saying. Jackson State is a top five school. Their defense is everything. Their offense left about 3 touchdowns on the field because of penalties. I mean, you could argue that, man, but when you look, I mean, listen, when you look at it, okay, so Villanova potentially Sac State's only played a game, so I don't know if you can really make an argument for Sac State. We don't know what they are yet. Delaware has an FBS win and has looked really impressive this weekend against Delaware State. Missouri State already has a ranked win on their schedule, and Central Arkansas is a solid win for them as well, out of conference on the road. UIW has an FBS win by double digits and a top 10 week one win. Montana State has looked great these first 2 weeks. South Dakota State played a Power Five school within three. Montana's been unstoppable in their first two games, and North Dakota State has outscored their first two opponents almost 100 something to like 17. So I don't think Jackson State is just a guaranteed top five school, man. I mean, they could have the talent, but they got a chance. They got to prove it on the field first, man. You can't rank teams based on paper perception. I've got to rank teams based on what they do on the field, man. And so I think they're a top 10 team right now, potentially a top five team if they can prove it. But I don't think you could say they're a top five school right this second, just in my opinion. Is the CAA the second best conference over the Missouri Valley? Ron, I won't get carried away. I won't get carried away here. But we'll see. Listen, the CAA has looked a lot better than I expected. I will say that. Grambling, Grambling played Northwestern State, Diamond, and I thought that was a game they should win. If I'm not mistaken, Grambling was the favorite in that game, or at least they should have been. Northwestern State was coming off a 47 to nothing loss to Montana, so I think that was a game that Grambling had to win, and a Grambling should win, and they did. I give them credit for that. The running game finally looked like it was supposed to, and man, Maurice Washington is a highlight tape waiting to happen. Now, the one question I do have is why Faison Wilson hasn't been getting a lot of touches, a lot of snaps, but maybe we'll see him once the competition and once the games start ramping up. Let's see. Montana State has their top three running backs hurt, put up 63 points, and play Oregon State this weekend too. Now, if they beat Oregon State, we can have a conversation. If they beat Oregon State, they can have a conversation. I think the JSU has a top five defense, but the team is still top 15. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. Israel, that's easy. I 1,000% agree with that. I mean, Jackson State, of course, has one of the best defenses in the country, but well, I like you said, they're top 15, top 10 team. I think they're closer to top 10 than top 15 right now. I think they, if you look at the rankings and say like head to head, I think, in my opinion, Holy Cross, Weber State, Chattanooga, Eastern Kentucky, William and Mary. I mean, Jackson State, I think, in my opinion, I think Jackson State is the better team out of those other teams. But then when you start looking up in that top 10, the 1 through 9 range, it becomes a real debate. Um, JSU has to influence other voters, and they're looking at the scores and pressing with scores, and they'll jump. It's about pollsters. Go back to the early BCS era when teams beat you bad. That's true. It's not paper perception when there was 2 touchdowns that weren't given look at the film. Man, I was at the game. Like I was there. Like I get you. I mean, there were some bad calls both ways, but I don't think just because you beat Tennessee State by that much, I don't think that proves you're a top five team. Because I mean, I love Tennessee State. I think they're going to be great in the OVC, but I don't think any of the top 9 teams would have lost that game either. So I get what you mean, but well, listen, in due time. I mean, it's a top 10 team. I don't think you could be upset being a top 10 team right now and going into week 3. But man, let's get to the offensive players of the week. Man, let me get this thing out the way. But man, the first player of the week, probably the overall player of the week, is Matthew Solka from Holy Cross. Man, he went crazy, man, through the air and on the ground, led Holy Cross to an FBS win, hit the Hail Mary to win the game with no time left. And listen, 238 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, almost 150 yards rushing. Listen, Matthew Solka went insane. And this is a guy who, it's funny, he hit a Hail Mary this weekend to beat an FBS team, and him and the exact same wide receiver hit the same Hail Mary to win in the first round of the playoffs over Sacred Heart last year. Him, him and Coker, him and Coker are the most dynamic Hail Mary duo in the FCS, man. And listen, Matthew Sulka is legit, man. He deserves this player of the week for that FBS win. Um, Darian Chafin, incarnate word wide receiver, is my second player of the week. Man, 7 catches, 262 yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. I want to repeat that. 7 catches for almost 300 yards receiving and found the end zone twice. And this doesn't even include a preseason first team FCS All American and Taylor Grimes, which is still on that receiving core. Darian Chafin proved that he could be a number one target in this offense, and GJ Kinney has this offense rolling behind Lindsey Scott, Chafin, and Taylor Grimes. The offensive line has looked amazing as well, but Darian Chafin was one of the best players in the country this weekend. And finally, Jason Shelley, Missouri State quarterback, completed almost 80% of his passes, 297 yards, and threw 5 touchdowns through the air to lead Missouri State to the big win over UT Martin in terms of the only ranked win of the weekend at the FCS level. And Jason Shelley and Shador Sanders, in my opinion, are going to have an absolute battle for the Walter Payton Award. I think they're probably the two favorites right now, but don't sleep on guys like Solka, Tim DeMorad at Fordham, and some of these and some of these other guys who are coming up in the FCS. Man, but these are my three offensive players of the game. Larry's listen. I think you're talking about the incarnate word. Listen, I think you're talking about the Lindsey Scott Jr. from Incarnate Word. I gave his wide receiver the nod this time, Vic, only because I feel like wide receivers don't get the credit. And that's one of the big things that I try to stress on is that we don't always give the quarterback credit. If a wide receiver has a game where he catches 260 plus yards and 2 touchdowns on 7 catches, I went with Chafin over Lindsey Scott just because Chafin was the number one guy for Incarnate Word. So that's the only reason is because I feel like a lot of analysts and a lot of fans, instead of giving the wide receiver and quarterback equal credit, they always just go ahead and give it to the quarterback. So that's why I went with Chafin over Scott, man. But the defensive players of the week, my overall defensive player of the week is Jalen Jones, man. He won the FCS Defensive Player of the Week, I think, by FCS stats, and it was an easy one. Um, Listen, Jalen Jones had 3 interceptions, a pick six, and 2 pass breakups against Campbell this weekend. He was all over the field as a redshirt freshman. And Jalen Jones and this defense is one of the reasons why William and Mary has been one of the more impressive teams in the country at the FCS level. They get an FBS win, they get a huge win over Campbell this weekend. And so Jalen Jones, 3 interceptions, a defensive touchdown, and multiple pass breakups had to be the player of the week. Now, 2 defensive ends that get the honorable mentions: Niles Gaddy from Jackson State and Chris Whitaker from Incarnate Word. Incarnate Word goes back to back with players of the week. Both of these guys had 4 sacks and 4+ tackles for loss. Now, Niles Gaddy had 6 total tackles, 4 sacks, 4.5 for loss, while Chris Whitaker had 9 tackles, 4 sacks, 4 tackles for loss, and a forced fumble. And in my opinion, both of these guys were dominant this weekend. They were disruptive in the backfield, and they led really talented defensive units where I mean, either one of these guys could have easily been the player of the week. To have the defensive player of the week this week was extremely hard because there's some guys who I left off that absolutely went crazy in terms of tackles, but then a pick six, 3 interceptions, 2 guys that put up 4 sacks apiece and multiple tackles. Listen, all three of these guys were impressive, but Jalen Jones, Niles Gaddy, Chris Whitaker are our defensive players of the week, and they all deserve it. And I know there was a lot of talk about Gaddy and everything. Listen, man, I still give him credit, even though there, I get it. It was people say, Scotty and everyone said if you took him off this team, he wouldn't do it. But for me, I think he still gets credit because he still went out there on the field and did it. 210, you're live.
Zach, appreciate the call. Um, During the Mountain West broadcast for the UIW game, the announcer said that, they don't follow FCS that close, but they think UIW could compete for a national championship. Do you think that's feasible?
Okay. This is a question that I have been struggling with myself. I think yes. And I know that's going to be controversial in terms of the FCS analyst community. In my opinion, Incarnate Word's offense is going to put them in any game that they play because they're going to be able to put the ball in the air and spread all these big physical defenses out, and they're going to put up points. And I really do think this sounds crazy. They're going to average over 42 points per game this year. Really and truly. And the one question, though, and this is the same question that I get about Kennesaw, about Sacramento State, about, I mean, who else do you want to put in that conversation? Missouri State, is when you don't have a history of winning in the playoffs, when it gets in late November, early December, and you don't have that history, which Incarnate Word doesn't have, can you do it on the biggest stage? And so, can the defense hold up? That's a question because they do play in the Southland and they get a lot of experience stopping these spread pass happy schemes. But what happens when they have to go to the Fargo Dome and defend against North Dakota State, who's going to run the ball 45 times and average 7 yards to carry? Can they win a scrappy game like that? Is the question. But with GJ Kinney, this is only his first year ever as a head coach. If he can just get them to the second round this year, I'd like their chances over the next few years to compete for an FCS title. I I just think you have to get past the first round in your first year. And the fact that in his first year, his first two wins are a top 10 FCS upset and an FBS win. You got to give Coach Kinney a lot of credit and that staff a lot of credit for what they've done.
Appreciate it.
Hey, thank you, man. Mr. Ford, you're live.
Hey, how you doing?
Not too bad.
Okay, look here. First thing I want to say is this here. Let me turn this thing down here. This, wait a minute. Hold on. Isn't that guy up in Notre Dame named Marcus Freeman? What's his name up there?
Yeah, it's Marcus Freeman.
Okay, first thing he need to do, everybody that was on Brian Kelly's staff, when he took that head coaching job, get rid of them, including that offensive coordinator. Bring your own offensive coordinator. Come down here to the Southland, pick you one of them guys, or go to the NFL and get you somebody. Get rid of all them people that was on Brian Kelly's staff. Get your own people. Okay, second thing I want to say is to these North Carolina A&T graduates. You see how you got beat this week? Get used to that. You're going to get beat like that for the next 3-4 years. Okay? And then when you get mad and realize, you say, well, whose fault is this? It's that AD's fault. It's Hilton's fault and it's the president's fault. And the one you need to get rid of is Hilton. Because this was his idiotic idea to put you in the Big South. Now he got you over your head up there in that CAA. But now let me tell you what I called about. What I called about was I saw the FAMU Albany State game. And let me just say this here. FAMU basically was dominated by a Division II school for 2 quarters. The offensive line, except them 2 tackles, is not even SWAC material. They playing a high school boy at center. He shouldn't even be on the roster. That boy should be redshirting. He's too small. He's not fast enough. He should be redshirted. Now that left guard they got, he's mediocre. The boy next to Colvin, he's pathetic. Okay? And here's the other thing that I thought that FAMU's front 7 would be more dominant. Now, let me tell you this. That boy, Greg, what's his name? Is it Land? What's the boy's name?
Yeah, Isaiah Land.
Isaiah Land is everything they say he is, and I like Jenna Hunt. That front 7 is not as dominant. Now, I'm going to tell you the kid that is dominant, too, is that boy they got from that junior college. Isn't his name Major?
Yeah. Oh,
Isn't that
Isaiah
linebacker
Major.
name
He came
Major?
from Indy. Yeah, he came from Indy Community College.
That boy's for real. He's for real. That other linebacker got to stand up. But now here's the worst thing about FAMU's defense. The man who is now actually the defense coordinator and is calling the plays, he was with Nick Saban. He was with Nick Saban. He was on Nick Saban's staff. I think he was I don't know if he was a position coach. I think he was an analyst. Listen, that defense looks terrible. It is so vanilla. They doing nothing exotic. He ain't calling for no blitzes, nothing. And I'm just sitting here how did FAMU go from the team they had last year to this team this year? Now remember that Keenan Forbes, that big boy that went out to Seattle and got cut? They missing him. That offensive line, like I'm telling you now, I think Goss is gonna be all right. Colvin is gonna be all right. Now the other thing Coach Simmons got to do, I told y'all before, this boy is a Dan Fouts. He's got to run 2 tight ends. One tight end has got to be for primarily offensive line blocking. The other one's got to be a wing tight who will be in the pass play. He got to take all them wide receivers off the field. There's too many wide receivers out there. He don't need no more than 3. And one of them wide receivers, it needs to be a tight end. Now that boy they got called Manigo. You know what I'm talking about? I think he wears 85.
Yeah, he's like the tight end / big wide receiver.
Yeah, but they've been playing him. See, here's why what they doing with him is a waste of time. They running him outside the numbers. He don't have that kind of speed. He needs to be a wing tight. He needs to help them in the middle of the field, and then you can sneak him sometimes deep. But they wasting time running him out wide. They wasting time running him out wide. Now, I'm going to close on this. Y'all see now why Fox and that other network, ESPN, they doing what they doing, trying to monopolize the money. Let me tell you something. And I told you this, Blue, and y'all kind of disagreed with me about a year ago. Appalachian State will beat everybody in that darn gone ACC right now, with the exception of about 2 or 3 teams. Now, they won't beat Clemson. I don't think they'll beat Miami. And if that boy from Florida State keep playing like he playing, they won't beat them. But let me tell you something. The rest of them folks in that ACC, App State will beat them. Do you see how that Sun Belt Conference clowned this weekend?
They balled out.
That's why I keep telling y'all, football has become regional. The best football is in the South and in the Midwest. Everywhere else, it's mediocre. Blue, did you want to ask me anything before I left?
Oh, no, I disagree with you. When I was talking conference realignment, I said the ACC is messing up by not getting App State on the phone. And they let UCF, which
there you go. That's right.
Yeah, they have a major brand in Orlando, which would
they do.
It would pretty much, outside of Gainesville, let the ACC lock up Florida, and they let them walk right to the Big 12 for some reason.
That's right.
But you still have App State, you still have Coastal Carolina, who is building an outstanding program, and you still have Memphis and Tennessee, who I think would still be a geographical fit for that conference.
Well, see, here's the thing. With every one of them programs you just called out, it's good coaching. See, let me tell you something. That guy that said UCF, he came from Auburn. He's trying to make UCF an SEC program now. People don't know that, but he's trying to do that. Okay, that guy up there at Coastal Carolina, that coach up there, that dude's a big timer. He just at Coastal Carolina. There's a lot of people tried to get him, but those people in Myrtle Beach put that money together and kept him there. Okay. Now, one guy I want to always give credit to is Pat Narduzzi. I don't want to. Pat Narduzzi is one of the top 10 coaches in the country up at Pitt. That guy know what he's doing. Pat Narduzzi is good. But let me just tell you this: when you look at, they giving that guy at Georgia Tech $3 million a year base salary, and he ain't worth nothing. You know what I'm talking about? That Jeff Collins, he's pathetic. He is pathetic.
This is his last year. They're going to fire him.
Listen, I don't think he's going to make you think he's going to make the whole season?
No, probably not. It's going to take one big blowout because, I mean, they got lucky to beat Western Carolina this weekend.
There you go. Now let me say this, and then I'm going to shut it down because I know you got a bunch of callers. Listen, I've been told y'all, now, Texas A&M got all that money, but Jimbo Colvin ain't that big-time coach y'all think he is. And he ain't never impressed me because, see, he left a mess down there at Florida State, and guess what they did? They sacrificed Willie Taggart, okay? Jimbo left a mess, and then They gave Willie Taggart 15 games and then got rid of him. Okay, so let me just say this: you people out there at Texas A&M, yeah, you spent $20 million on that recruiting class, and you got. I think you spent over $200 million on athletics. But one thing y'all need to remember: Texas A&M, Jimbo Fisher is your head coach. Listen, Blue, y'all have a good night.
Thank you, Mr. Ford.
Okay.
Man, there was so many upsets this weekend. We were sitting in the press box, man, waiting for the Jackson State game, and we had the Notre Dame game. We had all these FCS games on, man. It was a great weekend. If you were like an underdog fan, which I think everyone kind of is in a way, it was amazing to watch this weekend, man. The fact that Nevada, Marshall, Weber State, Incarnate Word, I mean, listen, Georgia Southern over Nebraska, it was a great weekend for upsets, and I loved it. And App State App State over Texas A&M was another one. Listen, man, I love it. Anytime Jimbo Fisher and A&M lose, I'm a happy guy. And Texas should have pulled off the upset over Bama. We won't talk about that one though, just yet. But man, let's get to some of these FCS over FBS upsets before we get into our games of the week, man. Listen, we kind of already hit them, but listen, Incarnate Word 55-41 over Nevada in a huge upset. Listen, I just want to say, and we got 200 something people in here. If you watched the preview show, I want to remind you, I called these first two upsets, man. I told y'all Incarnate Word, Nevada, and Eastern Kentucky Bowling Green were upset locks almost, and we hit them on the head, man. That's back-to-back weeks. We've got one Delaware over who they beat, Navy, week 1. We called that one too, man. But listen, 55-41 over Nevada. Eastern Kentucky 59-57, 7 overtimes. I got to ask you guys, and y'all can put in the comments quickly, how do y'all feel about the new overtime rules where after the second or third overtime it's just back-to-back 2-point conversions? How do y'all feel about that? Because I think, it's better than teams having to, do full drives from the 25, in my opinion. But I think it really, really tests the creativity of the offensive coordinators. I don't know if you guys saw, I think Eastern Kentucky, it was like the 6th overtime. They went for 2 and did a hook and lateral. A hook and lateral from the 2-yard line, which is a 2-point conversion. They did a hook and lateral with an offensive tackle. They got so creative with their play calling. So, for me, I think it's more exciting. But if you don't have a creative offensive mind, man, you are screwed. Because after like that second or third overtime, you are out of plays to run. And I think you've seen that in a few of the 6, 7 overtime games that have happened since the rule change. I see a few guys say they love it and a few don't. But for me, I'm torn on it. But listen, it's so much more exciting to watch, in my opinion. 229, you're live.
Hey, Blue.
What's up, man?
Just want to say something about the Sun Belt Conference. Troy University, I know they played against, was it Alabama A&M this weekend?
Yeah, it was Alabama A&M.
Yeah, Alabama. Troy University, their seniors, that's the best recruiting class in the history of Troy football, and they have underperformed their entire time at Troy. I don't know, when you look at Troy, where do you see them in the ranking within the Sun Belt Conference, next to the App States, Coastal Carolina, and I guess Georgia Southern and Georgia State, because that Eastern Division within the Sun Belt is the best division within the Sun Belt.
I think it just depends how this coaching staff can develop those recruits, because you talk about the success on the recruiting in the portal and on the recruiting trail, but man, when I think they're in tier 2, whatever that may be, I think they're in the bottom tier of that division, because when you look at that conference, I think they're still behind Coastal, they're still behind App State, and then really that's really tier 1, and then Louisiana, now that they've lost Napier, is probably in that tier 2 range. I think you could put Troy in that bottom tier 2, maybe tier 3 if they can't start developing talent. But Troy was really, really good under Neil Brown. That's when they upset LSU. And then it seems like ever
and
since
Nebraska.
he left, yeah. And ever since he left, Troy just kind of hasn't been able to get a guy in there that can develop talent the way Neil Brown did. And so that's their biggest challenge is just getting the coaching staff that knows how to work with what Troy has around them. But with the facilities and the support of that fan base, I don't think there's any reason Troy can't be successful. They're just missing that it factor in the coaching staff, in my opinion.
Yeah, the coach we hired after Neil Brown, that was a pure dumpster fire for 3 years. And Coach Summerall that's come in there, he's trying to revamp that, but he's at least maybe 2-3 years away. I don't know. But hey, Blue, that was it. I just wanted to call in and talk about Troy. Hey, have a good one.
Hey, have a good one, man. Appreciate you. Mr. Campbell, call the numbers right here. 701-799-9585 is the call-in number. But Weber State over Utah State, we've talked about that. Also, Holy Cross over Buffalo was the other FBS upset of the weekend. But we're going to get to our games of the week right after this caller. 931, you're live.
Hey, is Weber State that good, or was Utah State just that bad?
Coming into the season, Utah State had a lot of hype in terms of their conference projections, but we know this. Everybody who plays Bama early, especially teams that aren't on that same level, usually have a hangover. So I think it's a little bit of a combination. I think Weber is a little bit better than we expected. I had them in my top 25, but I think right now they're probably a top 15 team in the FCS, but we really won't know where they stand until they get into that Big Sky schedule and they really start getting tested because they get to play the Montanas, Montana States, Eastern Washingtons, and etc.
Okay, yeah, and that's the matchup I wanted to ask you about. Where would you see if you had to call that game right now? Eastern Washington versus Weber State. Who do you have coming out on top?
It's
It's
tough.
tough.
Yeah, it's tough because I don't think Oregon and Utah State are comparable FBS games, in my opinion.
It's very true.
I think it depends on where the game's played. I think if it's on the red turf, I lean Eastern Washington because I do think Talkington is that good of a quarterback. But oh man, after watching this weekend though, and Weber's had Eastern's number. I don't know if you remember, Weber in the midst of the Eric Berrier era, Weber State won 4 straight Big Sky titles and knocked Eric Berrier and Eastern Washington off last season. It was the big upset. So I think I would lean Weber slightly, but I think that would be a competitive game. I want to see where that game's played though this year.
All right, thank you for answering my questions.
Appreciate you, man. Got Mr. Campbell on the line. Mr. Campbell, you're live.
Nephew, hey man, first of all, let me just say, great job, Zach, on the questions, but the swag conference call. But man, you gotta do like Dr. Cavill, bro. You got to say, Zach from the Bluebloods podcast. You got to keep branded, bro, because people hear those questions, then they go check you out like Dr. Cavill. So you got to always say, put that Bluebloods in there, okay? So that's
I
a
got
little
you.
thing. So make sure you. Now, here's the question I want to ask you, Blue, and I want to talk about Tennessee State and where they're sitting at right now. So we've looked at them. We've seen them play a couple of games. They've looked pretty good. Now, they were picked, I believe, 4th in the OVC. Do you believe they've got a chance to get to the top 2? It looks like they got to play UT Martin at the end of the year, and I think they got one more other game. But what do you think? Do they really have a shot of potentially winning that conference or finishing number 2 and maybe getting in the playoffs?
I definitely think they have a chance to win it. Their biggest competition, of course, is going to be UT Martin, who looked really, really good this weekend against Missouri State. They lost by 5, but they struggled with quarterback play. But the question is can Draylon Ellis be more efficient through the air? Because what they did with Jason Shelley is they stopped his scrambling really, really well. And I'm worried if you take that away from Draylon Ellis, there's no chance for Tennessee State to succeed. Draylon Ellis has to run for 50 to 75 yards per game for that offense to be at their highest output or highest potential. So that's the question mark I have against UT Martin. But they get, I think Murray State's a question mark. we haven't seen them against a good FCS squad, and them and Tennessee State have had some good battles. I believe Tennessee State called them last year. That's probably their next biggest competition. But right now, I think you could say after the first 2 weeks of the season, they're a top two team talent wise in the OVC. The biggest test for Eddie George and that coaching staff is to keep that team focused and let them understand that even though we're probably going to be sitting at 0-3 because they have their FBS game this weekend, even though we're 0-3, all our goals are ahead of us and we're a better team than our record shows because as a coach it's really really hard to do that.
Yeah, that's the thing that when I was looking at that schedule, and you hit it right on the head, is can they, as they see the forest because of the trees, and that's the thing that if he stays focused. What I like about Eddie, who is the complete opposite of Dion, his team is taking on his toughness. You can tell slowly but surely they're starting to gravitate to that. Grind it out. We're going to stay in the game. We're just going to play our game. Nothing flashy. Let's just keep running the ball. Let's keep playing. And I think what I liked about Tennessee State, there was many times in that game Saturday they could have just gave up because they really weren't moving the ball. They weren't executing. But you could tell those guys were like, you know what? We can win this game if we can make a play. They just never could make a play to win the game. So that's one thing. And then, Blue, one last thing, and then you don't have to talk about it now, but maybe the next few weeks, because we hearing a lot about Shedeur. Can you give us like a quarterback ranking maybe every week of the top 5 FCS quarterbacks so we can just kind of get a comparison? Because I think what happens is with a lot of fans, they don't know the other guys that are out there, right? And maybe if we can kind of see, week by week, I think that would just be interesting just to kind of track that going forward.
I definitely can do that. I'll start doing that where I rank my top 5 quarterbacks. I've been waiting because it's hard to compare stats this early. I'm also going to be coming out with a Buck Buchanan, Jerry Rice, and Walter Payton watch list about week 4 or 5. So that will kind of keep people up with the award races too. But I'll definitely do that. I think Shedeur is top 5 easily. And I said on my last show, I think he's top 2 right now. Him and Jason Shelley have really and truly separated themselves in terms of consistency, explosiveness, and of course stats do matter as a quarterback. We both know that. They put them up week in and week out. I mean, Jason Shelley went out there and threw for 305 touchdowns this week. And I think the fact that Shedeur didn't have, I would say he had a good game, but he didn't have that same game where, because you know how it was, Mr. Campbell. Everyone was saying that he was going to win the Heisman last week. There's no talk like that this week after the way that game turned out. So I'll definitely do that. But I think he's top 2, top 3, depending if you're splitting hairs. But for me, I would have him number 2, Jason Shelley number 1. And I think you could argue that they're probably 1A, 1B right now.
I 100% agree, man. I 100% agree. Hey, man, well, great show. I'll let you get back to it.
Appreciate you, Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
So yeah, that will be coming. We're doing quarterback rankings and everything like that. So if there's anything else y'all want to see, man, let me know. Excuse me, we can make that work. But let's talk about our games of the week, man. And also, yes, I did forget about Southeast Missouri State too. They are competition in the OVC, and they're going to run the football, man. Geno Hess is a monster, but also that new quarterback, Byron, you might help me out. I don't know if you're an SCMO fan. I'm blanking on the kid's name, but he had a crazy week this week against Southern Illinois too. So I definitely I definitely got to give him credit, man. Listen, any UIW merch, let me know, Michael. I'm also, so this weekend something came up. I'm not going to be able to travel for a game this weekend. I had something kind of come up, so no FCS travel game of the week this week. But week 4 next week, I will be at Incarnate Word, Southeastern Louisiana, down there in Southland Country, man. So I'll be covering that game in person, Michael. So hopefully if you travel to see Incarnate Word, man, I'll definitely catch up with you at that game. But let's talk about the games of the week, man. I was at one was on Thursday night. I've already dropped an article. People probably already know a little bit about it. Missouri State beats UT Martin 35-30. I thought UT Martin looked really good, man. Listen, quarterback play for UT Martin was a big question mark, and I think that's answered. Wynn has thrown for 300 plus yards the first 2 weeks of the season. They had a real good chance to win this game, and they seemed to make mistakes at the worst times, and they had no answer for Jason Shelley and Tyrone Scott, which might be the best quarterback to wide receiver tandem in the FCS. Scott had 3 receiving touchdowns this weekend, led the team in receiving yards. UT Martin just was not able to slow down Missouri State's offense, and that really and truly cost them that game. But Missouri State looks good, and I'm interested to see how this Jason Shelley Shador Sanders race for the Walter Payton, because I do think that's what it's going to come down to, how that unfolds over the next few weeks as the competition for both of these teams continues to ramp up. But let's get to the Jackson State Tennessee State game. I know everyone's been waiting for my thoughts on it being there, man. I hope y'all like the highlights. I got them from press box level, man, with this camera I got. So I'm still working on. I missed the game winner because I didn't notice the dudes next to me's equipment was in the way, because there was no play in that bottom corner of the end zone all game. And when he threw it, I was following him, and I noticed that the equipment got right in my way, and I tried to correct it as fast as possible. But you know how it goes. But listen, I'm so glad it didn't rain. I'm so glad there wasn't a weather delay, because if there was a weather delay, you guys were never going to let me go to another game. I know, and I know for a fact y'all were never going to let me show back up. But listen, this game was interesting. I thought the Jackson State defense played an outstanding game. Niles Gaddy, Aubrey Miller, that entire defensive front played an outstanding game. Tennessee State had trouble handling the front seven of Jackson State. Tennessee State's O line had some bright spots where they were able to bust a few runs for Devon Starling and Draylon Ellis early. And I gotta give Tennessee State credit for this. On that first drive, I was really wondering how conservative Tennessee State was going to be early. They saw what Jackson State did to FAMU early in that Orange Blossom Classic, but they did not back down. Eddie George, in my opinion, knew he needed points, and that deep shot he took that Draylon Ellis hit on that first drive to put them in field goal range was impressive. And I think that showed that Eddie George was not going to back down from that moment, and he went for it, and he knew he had to get points on the board. And that was a drive that I feel like if they got 7, the momentum of that offense might have taken a little bit of a turn, but the fact that they only got 3 really and truly kind of took the wind out of the sails of a really great first drive. But I mean, I got the stat sheet here from the press box, man. I mean, the fact that they only had 100 something total yards, 140 total yards on 60 plays, that's not going to get it done against a top 10 team in the country like Jackson State. Devon Starling, I feel like had a good game. Really and truly, even though the stat box might not show it, what he had 70 yards rushing for about 4 yards per carry. I mean, listen, he did everything he could. The problem with the offense is that they just couldn't. Every single time they got any sort of momentum, man, they just shot themselves in the foot, regardless of what it was. Was it a drop pass? Was it a overthrow by Draylon Ellis? Was it an inaccurate pass by Draylon Ellis? Was it a false start by the offense? Was it a holding call? It just always seemed like Tennessee State either shot themselves with the foot, or Niles Gaddy and one of those defensive players from Jackson State made a big play. And so, Tennessee State had opportunities to put that game, to make that game a lot closer and put a little bit of pressure on Jackson State's offense. Draylon in the second half missed that deep shot. Number 24 Dobson absolutely toasted Isaiah Bolden in one-on-one coverage and had him beat by 3 or 4 steps, and Draylon Ellis overthrew it. You could tell that he got a little happy in the pocket in the second half, and he overthrew that. But that was going to be a touchdown pass if he hits Dobson in stride. So you can't miss opportunities like that against Jackson State. And Coach Prom talked about it in his press conference today, where he was proud of his defense, but there were some times where Tennessee State had an opportunity to put some points on the board and they didn't execute it. And so I think Eddie George talked about it in his press conference where he understood that his team did not execute when they needed to, and that's fine. But Jackson State's offense, man, listen, I get it. They put up over 400 yards of total offense, but the thing is, man, when you get in the red zone, man, that's where it gets tough to put points on the board. And I had someone say, listen, they said, man, this wasn't a defensive battle. Jackson State put up 400 yards of total offense, et cetera, et cetera. Listen, You know what yards from the 20 to the 20 are without points? They're pointless. No one cares if you got 400 yards of offense but didn't get points on that drive. So listen, um you can say you put up a bunch of yards, but listen, if you don't put up points on that drive, then the yards don't matter. So it's still a defensive battle. It was different defensive strategies. Jackson State has a defense where they can go out there and they can play dominating, stifling defense and hold a team to 140 yards of total offense. Tennessee State utilized the opportunistic bend but don't break approach where, listen, you can get all the yards you want from the 20 to the 20. But when you get inside that 20, we're going to make a play where you don't come away with 7. And both of those defenses are effective at certain times. So the idea that, it, y- and this the one thing that gets me about people's takeaways from this game is, yes, Jackson State made mistakes and shot themselves in the foot at times, but I've been hearing way too many people not look at this like an analyst and just say Tennessee State gets no credit for playing good. And you know, it and that kind of gets me because listen, if you flip it, let's just be honest here together. It's your favorite team. They they give up 400 yards of total offense, but they force 3 turnovers in the red zone, and they hold a team that just scores 60 points to 3 field goals. I mean, listen, everyone would be saying how great Jackson State's defense played in the red zone. That's the truth. And so that's what gets me is, I mean, no one's giving Tennessee State any credit, man. They played excellent red zone defense. And I get it. There were some questionable calls on both sides. Listen, the targeting, complete BS. There were some holding penalties on both sides that I didn't really think were holding when I go back and look. And listen, man, the touchdowns that were taken away. Listen, I went back and watched the game in person. In person, the replay they showed on the jumbotron, it looked like Martin fumbled. I'm just going to be honest with you. They looked like Martin fumbled from our perspective. I in the stream I watched, they didn't have a good view of it, so I don't know which stream you guys watched because there were like 19 streams going on. And and listen, regardless if he was down or not, man, it was the call on the field. You could say what ifs on both of them. Now the Shador one, I personally thought he got in, and the replay I saw. Listen, and this is what kills me is, man, why do you have a football game and you don't have cameras at the goal line? Every single game should have cameras at the goal line on both sides. That way you can see from your right side and your left side if a play develops and you have to see if the ball gets across the plane. It is not expensive to have a small camera on the pylon so you could see things like that, man. The stream I watched, they had the angle in the end zone, but it was only on the side they didn't need. And so there was no way to like actually there was no way to actually review that. And so that's a whole nother thing, man, is that there's no reason that I don't care if ESPN was not streaming the game. I don't care if CBS, Fox, there is no game if you want to referee fairly that you should not have cameras in the end zone. That is ridiculous. And man, a GoPro or a little camera is like $50, bro. Like, I don't want to hear that the promoters couldn't afford it or anything like that. Like a singular camera to put by the pylon so you can get the call right. You don't need to buy a $2,000 camera. Like it's not it's ridiculous, but that's a whole nother point. But regardless, touchdowns taken away or not, it was called how it was called, man. And the strip from Shane Hooks, that was Tennessee State making a play, was it not? Sacking Shador to take him out of field goal range and forcing Jackson State to punt from like inside the 50. I mean, listen, Tennessee State made plays, man. The only thing I'm saying, RJ, is that too many people are trying to say Tennessee State gets zero credit when that's not the case. If you actually watch this football game at without any bias as a fan, Tennessee State made plays in the red zone, man. You gotta give them that. But listen, Jackson State played an amazing defensive game. I thought Shador had a fine game, man. 30 for 44, 276, a touchdown. And the one thing is I'm really wondering what happened to the deep wide receiving core that Jackson State was supposed to have. Because when you look at the stat box, Shane Hooks, Dallas Daniels, and Kevin Coleman got like all the targets. I mean, I mean that you can't. I mean, Shane Hooks had 13 targets last night, man. And so for me, I'm wondering is when's the depth going to kind of develop in that wide receiving core? And I want to give Kevin Coleman some props, man. I don't know if you guys saw in the highlights that I posted. Um, Listen, that hit he took over the middle. So they were driving. I think it was late fourth quarter, man. He came on a post route and got lit up, and somehow he somehow held on to the ball in that situation, man. Kevin Coleman played a hell of a game, even though he only had 2 catches. That catch kept the drive alive, and that catch was the one where they put up, I believe it was the 9 point one, the third field goal of the game. And shout out to Kevin Coleman, man. I thought he dropped it. When I was in the press box, I was like, oh man, they took his head off. But man, he went hang on, bro, that one. Okay, I'm done with this, bro. Like, look, we ain't talking about Tennessee State had more penalties than Jackson State, RJ. Tennessee State had 9 penalties, bro. Stop blaming the refs on everything, man. Just stop. This is getting outrageous. You can't blame the refs when your team had less penalties than the other team. Just come on. But anyway, but I thought Jackson State played well, man. And listen, the kicking game was so important, man. I don't know if you guys watched the press conference, you could tell when Coach Prime got that question about the kicker, he was so excited. And the fact that Mata got his opportunity, Mata was named the MVP. I know I kind of cut that off at the end of the press conference. Listen, you could tell how much that meant to him, man. That's a true freshman coming in, and without him, Jackson State doesn't win this game. He balled out, and the block was not his fault. I went and watched, and I think you even see on my highlights the ones I got from the press box. It was one of the two guards just missed their block, and it caused like the whole chain reaction along the line, and they let someone come straight free up the middle and blocked it. And so that wasn't even Mata's fault, and Mata's probably hitting that kick anyway. And so I got to give Mata some credit, man. In at the press conference, you could just tell how humble um and you could just tell how much it meant to him for him to be in that moment, man. So I want to give him a huge shout out because y'all know, as a freshman in a stadium of 50 plus thousand, knowing the game is probably coming down to your foot, man, he could have easily choked that moment away, especially when his first field goal is blocked, man. That could have gotten his head, and he could have been off the rest of the game. And so I got to give him a lot of credit, and he deserved every bit of that MVP trophy on that MVP trophy, man. Let me get to this call. 850, you're live.
Hey, Blue, how you doing, bro?
What's up, man?
Hey, what's going on, bro? I just wanted to talk to you in reference to a comment at the end of Coach Prime's SWAC conference. He was talking to in reference to scheduling, and I agree with him on most things. What I don't agree with him on is probably comparing FBS against FBS competition and the payout. Because he was saying, the 1.7, 1.4, 1.2 million payouts in comparison to 300,000 and the $450,000 payouts. And I know he understands that those are two different competitive levels that we are talking about. So, Blue, I just wanted to get your honest opinion on what you think about the whole deal. And then my second question is obviously Nebraska let Scott Frost go today. Who do you think would be a better candidate? Would it be Matt Campbell from Iowa State, or would it be Urban Meyer, considering his controversy down in Jacksonville recently?
I'm never going to vouch for Urban Meyer and his off the field issues, so I'll say Matt Campbell. Listen, Matt Campbell's such an underrated coach. I'm just going to put it out there. So I like Matt Campbell there. So I'll answer that one quickly. But in terms of the Coach Prime comments at the press conference, I do think he made a mistake comparing FBS payouts to FCS payouts, because some of the SWAC teams get on par with what FCS schools get. But I will say he does have a point in terms of FCS schools, not just HBCU schools, SWAC schools, whatever. All FCS schools have been asking for way too little money to come up there and get their heads beat in. And he had a point. I think, he made the mistake. And I think Ken Rashad and some people on Twitter, got after him on that comment. But I think the point he was making is that, you know, when you look at the brands, when you look at the attention, etc., why aren't we asking for more? It can't hurt to ask for more. And so, you know, I don't disagree with him because, you know, North Dakota State is only getting like 400,000 this weekend to go down to Arizona. Alabama State, I mean, their whole team couldn't have traveled to California for what they got paid. And that goes for anybody. Eastern Kentucky, Incarnate Word, whatever. All these schools should be asking for more money. And there's no reason you should take a game. Like, I don't know what Sanford got paid for Georgia. I'm sure it's somewhere on probably Hero Sports or something. But Sanford should not go to Athens in that stadium and and get shut out for anything less than close to 1 million, in my opinion. And I don't want to hear that these teams don't have that money, because 1 million to a school like Georgia, Ohio State, etc., is nothing. And so I think what people are missing is that it's bigger than just the SWAC. It's bigger than whatever. The entire FCS has been lowballing themselves in terms of out of conference games for a long, long time. And what I'm hoping happens is that people start negotiating their wealth, man. You cannot tell me it's fair value to go get beat 58 nothing for 300K. So I agree with his premise, but yeah, I mean, I think people lost the main message due to trying to correct him on his example, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes the other parameter. This I'm gonna throw a wrench in this. FCS schools playing Division II schools or NAIA schools, and I think that those schools have to pay the lower tier schools to play also. So if you're already in a financial crisis, then why are we paying six figures to schools that you're playing below your competition though?
Nah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, how much does Southern pay to Florida Memorial? Does anyone know?
I'm gonna do my research on those, but yeah.
Because I mean, that's a good question. I mean, you can't complain on what you're getting paid when, I mean, you're just turning the money back around to pay it to a D2 school. But you know, I still think he's right on in terms of negotiating, you know, your worth and everything like that. So, you know, the D2 conversation is an interesting one because Southern plays two of them this year. So did they just spend that LSU payout to pay two random D2 schools and NAIA schools to come to Baton Rouge and get beat? So that's a good question.
Exactly, and I read through some swag media, and they said, well, it's robberies, and it's our way of giving back to those HBCUs. I understand that, but like I told them, I said, once if you're in that crisis, then why would you do that if football is your bread maker and provides money to the other sports? But that was my point to them. But I definitely appreciate you taking the call, Blue. I
Appreciate you, man.
Keep doing what you're doing, brother.
But 404, you live.
Hey, what's going on, bro? I just want to touch on something out on Tennessee and Jackson State. Jackson State fans, they're making excuses. They're saying, well, we didn't do this well. Well, we didn't do that well. We didn't do this well. You can say the same thing for FAMU. Well, FAMU didn't do this well. They didn't do that well. That's why the score's like that. They got down to the red zone how many times, Blue?
Okay, so this was something I said on Ken Clark's show. They only got to the red zone 5 times, but they got inside Tennessee State territory, I think 9 or 10 times.
Okay, and one touchdown, right?
Yeah, one touchdown, and then I don't know how many field goals came in the red zone because the red zone's inside the 20. So I think they had some scoring drives that came outside the red zone too. So I don't even think that touchdown came inside the red zone because hang on. Yeah, it was a 27-yard pass from Shedeur to Willie Gaines. So they weren't even in the red zone on the touchdown drive.
And they're talking about all the mistakes. It wasn't because they was making mistakes. I feel like it was because of Texas State, Texas Southern putting that pressure on them. That's why they made all the mistakes. JSU, y'all got to stop. Tennessee State played a hell of a game. They made y'all one-dimensional, and they put that pressure on y'all. That's it. That's why y'all was making all those mistakes. I'm gone, Blue. Tennessee, Jackson State, stop making excuses, man.
Appreciate the call, man. Yes, I think you meant Tennessee State, Bryce. I think you meant Tennessee State.
Yeah, you meant Tennessee
410, you're live.
Well, what's going on, Blue? This double C double L.
What's up, man?
Hey, about the payouts y'all was talking about. I mean, it seems like the top FCS teams, they get high payouts. Like Eastern Washington, they playing Florida. Florida paying them $750,000. Idaho supposed to play Indiana. They paying them $1.3 million. And what Montana State playing Oregon State, they get paid $675,000. So the top teams, they get paid double what the low teams get paid, that $300,000 or something. So, you know, the better FCS team you are, the better, more money you get paid. That's what it looked like. And a question is, how do you have William and Murray 15th and they beat the FBS team?
I mean, hang on, let me go back. I can break down
You
these.
got like either State, Holy Cross.
Well, I mean, Holy Cross just beat an FBS team like this weekend.
Okay, all right. But
who?
Weaver State didn't, right?
Yeah, they beat Utah State 35-7 this weekend.
Oh yeah. Oh, hey. All right. Okay, but still, how? So all right. So you on your thing, you got all right. So how JSU ranked over them? They played 2 FCS teams and one of them bumps. And you got 3 teams that beat FBS under them.
Well, Holy Cross, I gotta see. They gotta prove themselves. Let's be honest. The Patriot is not the toughest conference in the country. Let's just be honest here.
Nah.
And that's why they've dominated.
Nah.
And they beat a FBS team, but they did it with a Hail Mary. And you know, listen, they look great, but Jackson State went out there, and we'll see about FAMU. I know some people have some questions, but listen, beating anybody 59-3 is impressive. And the reason I kept them at 10 is because I do think Tennessee State's a good team. I think a 16-3 win against Tennessee State is great, man. Listen, they sacked a mobile quarterback 8 times. They held, in my opinion, the best running back in HBCU football to less than 75 yards rushing. The defense played a great game. They had some offensive struggles in the red zone, but man, listen, they're a top 10 team in my opinion. And I think William and Mary are going to have some chances to prove themselves. But when you look ahead of them, Eastern Kentucky, FBS win. Chattanooga has, I believe, shut out their first 2 opponents. Weber State, FBS win. Holy Cross, FBS win. Delaware's up there, FBS win. We don't know what Sac State and Villanova are yet. You know, they just haven't had those games yet. But when they got a very tough conference schedule, and we're going to find out about them. Missouri State, they've been impressive, 2-0, 2 impressive wins. And then the top 5, I don't think needs any explaining, especially not Incarnate Word. And I think Incarnate Word, you can argue they could be higher than 5 right now.
Yeah, but JSU, FAMU, and Campbell not the same. William and Murray schedule and JSU playing FAMU, that's not the same. And they played Charlotte. So you saying Tennessee State is as good as Charlotte and FAMU is as good as Campbell with William and Murray schedule. That's what you're saying.
No, I'm not saying that. But Jackson State has looked just as impressive, in my opinion. And listen, Charlotte, I don't know. Listen, I might take any of the top 15 teams against Charlotte. Let's be honest. If NDSU, Montana, SDSU, Chattanooga, Weber, Holy Cross play Charlotte after they just got beat by William and Mary by almost 20, you're telling me you would not favor the FCS team in that situation?
I would. I would. If they the top. I mean, the top five. It ain't no doubt. Come on, it's not no doubt. They gonna give Charlotte problems. They gonna beat Charlotte. It's not ain't gonna be a problem. Them beating Charlotte. The other ones, which 14? Eastern Washington, is that 14?
Yeah. No, Eastern Kentucky is 14, who just beat Bowling Green this weekend.
Yeah, they might beat Charlotte. They probably beat Charlotte too. But out of that top 15, out of the top 10, yes, you got the weakest schedule. You saying FAMU is as good as them teams, as good as the teams they play.
Now, listen, their schedule has not been great. I agree with you there. That out of all the teams, I think them and Holy Cross have had the two weakest schedules out of the top 15. I agree with you,
We,
but
but
both of
we,
those teams have looked great in their games, and they have. And I think Jack State top five defense in the country, like I said, and they have a top two quarterback, and so for that, that keeps them in the top 10 for me because when I also look at it, so when you have not just a schedule argument right now, if Jackson State played Holy Cross, Weber, Chattanooga, Eastern Kentucky, William and Mary, that they would
mhm.
compete. They would compete. Now, will they dominate and beat them 50 to nothing? No, but they'll compete with those teams. And I think right now, Jackson State has proven they're a better team than the teams behind them right now. And listen, if Weber goes out there, wins the Big Sky, they'll jump Jackson State. And I think all these teams have opportunities to prove themselves against their schedule. Now, Eastern Kentucky's schedule in the A-Sun, you can probably debate it a little bit, especially if Kennesaw is not what everyone thinks they are. But we'll see. Man, listen, if
You know,
William and
A
Mary goes
Suns.
out there and wins the CAA, that they're going to jump up there too. So it's only week 2, and everyone's got room to move, in my opinion.
Yeah, A Suns a new conference. You know that's suspect. You know what I'm saying? You can't. I ain't going down them. I ain't going up. It's just a new conference. You know, so it is what it is with the A Suns. You know. I ain't down on them. But out of that top 15, yes, you got the weakest schedule by far. William and Murray would tear through the SWAC. It ain't even no doubt William and Murray would tear through the SWAC. And you know they would. They would tear through the SWAC.
Well, I mean, to be fair, Jackson State looks like they're going to do the same thing to the SWAC this year too. So I don't know.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. So
I,
because right
I,
now, I mean, we'll see. I mean, Grambling looked good against Northwestern State, but we'll see. We'll see, man. But hey, man, I'm gonna get to this next caller, man, so I can get through these last few games, man. But I appreciate you calling, Steve. You live.
Hey, what's up, Blue? How you doing?
Not too bad, man.
Good, good, good. I know everybody talking about the money games. Last year, Montana beat UW Washington. They got a $625,000 payout. I know, like the smaller FCS teams, like the HBCUs, like they get desperate. They get desperate for real. Like as far as the money out, they just see a number they throw out and don't want to negotiate. But it's all good. What do you think about Marshall being Notre Dame, Georgia Southern being Nebraska? No, who else? I can't forget. Appalachian State beat Texas A&M. That was a big one. How you think about that, Blue? Thanks for taking my call, man.
Appreciate you, man. Um, I think the Marshall one was probably the most surprising, especially with how Notre Dame hung in there with Ohio State last week. The App State one does not really surprise me. I'm going to be honest. App State has made a living upsetting FBS teams, and Texas A&M was insanely overrated. Nebraska with Scott Frost, not surprising. Scott Frost should have been fired 3 years ago, and it
Yeah.
doesn't
Trev
surprise me at
Alberts
all.
is AD. You know, his coach, his teammate Trev Alberts. He played in the back when Scott Frost played. He he's their AD. He's the athletic director. So he had to do something because his job on the line from the president. So that's what I'm saying. He had to make that move quick. That's what. Like when you got to fire somebody, you got to fire them quick, or they'll be a toxic culture.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they got to nail this hire. If they mess up this hire, it's a wrap for that program, man. They are going to go straight to the gutter in the Big Ten. But I think that was the biggest upset. Now, I did call. I picked. I can post my college football pick 'em. I said Cameron Ward and Washington State was going to beat Wisconsin, and they did too. So that one made me feel good in my soul.
Wow. Is he starting? Is he starting?
Yeah, he started. He started the first 2 games.
Wow. 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 That's crazy, man. That's crazy. But yeah, Appalachian State's been good, man. One season they went 13-1, just like Louisiana. So, some of them Sun Belt teams and Conference USA teams should be in a bigger, conference, man. Ever since this new realignment does. And last thing, what you think about all the Florida schools going to the SEC, except UCF in South Florida, Miami, Florida State, and Florida. Florida's already in the SEC, just Miami and Florida State. What you think that? You think that happens?
I think Florida State potentially. I think Miami would be a much tougher sell, but like Mr. Campbell says, everything Florida would try their damnness to try to block that happening. They do not want yeah, they do not want Florida State in the conference. So I don't know.
Okay.
I think it should, but we'll see, man. But hey, man, Steve, I appreciate the call, man.
Anytime, man. Have a good night.
You too, man. But man, let me finish up this Jackson State recap too, man. Can I give a shout out to Savion Wilkerson? I want to listen. Hang on real quick. Sean, I think you got the wrong membership link, my guy, man. I just want you to check that because Max has been posting that in here a few times, man. So Sean, got to get that fixed. But listen, I want to give a shout out to Savion Wilkerson. I said that he was the best running back on this Jackson State team before the season started, and I think he proved it this weekend. He looked more physical. He looked explosive. He looked like an every down back that Jackson State was missing, and that's something that I thought that he could bring to that offense. He could bring to that offense going into the season. And I don't know why he didn't get more carries week 1. Listen, Santi Marshall did his thing, but I think you saw that the physicality and just the ball protection, everything like that. That's the difference with Savion Wilkerson, and I really do think this guy could be the missing piece to this run offense for Jackson State. When you look at the game this weekend, he had 81 yards rushing, averaged almost 5.5 yards per carry, and was just physical at the point of attack, man. Like he could run through tackles, and you cannot just tackle him with one guy, and you have to wrap him up. And so I think going through SWAC play, having him in the backfield makes that front seven respect him a little bit more, and it opens up it opens up things for Shador in the back end of the defense. And so for me, I think Savion Wilkerson this weekend left no doubt in my mind, and it shouldn't have left any doubt in anyone's mind that he should be the starting running back for Jackson State moving forward. And I got to give the offensive line some credit too. Listen, they did struggle at times in terms of pass protection. And it seems like the offensive line's biggest problem is just consistency. They have certain stretches where they look so much better than last year. And then there's other times where it just seems like they lose focus and just in crucial moments. There were a few times in 3rd and shorts and things like that where they just missed a block and allowed Tennessee State to get upfield and stop them. And that to me was a big reason why the offensive consistency was missing, because they didn't have those mental lapses last week against Florida A&M. And now, Tennessee State has some defensive linemen come back. Of course, they lost TD Patterson. They lost him due to the targeting call, but I really do think the offensive line looks a lot better than last season. Zach Bro at the center spot, Evan Henry at the guard. Now, listen, Evan Henry had a tough game. Let's keep it real here. I think Evan Henry had 3 holding calls this weekend, and they were at like crucial times. And you can argue whether they were BS or questionable. The fact of the matter is Evan Henry had 3 holding calls in very, very, very crucial situations. And so you got to clean that up, because in big games, you can't have that happen. But listen, this was a great game. I don't know about you guys, and I know Jackson State fans might not agree with me on this one, because I get it's your favorite team. I'm the same way about mine. I'm so glad that this game was as competitive as it is. And I do want to say one thing, and I said this I forgot when last season, but I really do think the close call and the fact that this was a competitive game was a great wake up call for Jackson State, where it was like, listen, we have all this talent. We went out there, beat FAMU by 56 points. But then we came in the next week, we lost focus, we made some mistakes. The team we played forced some big plays. Man, we could get beat if we don't go out there and play our best game. So I think it really did give Coach Prom and this coaching staff a lot of ammunition for film study to preach to this team. Listen, man, y'all might be great on paper, but if we go out there and we don't play our best game, we can get beat on any given weekend. So to have a wake up call in an out of conference game that didn't affect your season, that you still found a way to come out with the win. Listen, that's great. And I talk about this all the time with good teams. What happened this weekend when you look at Alabama with the struggle win that they had. When you look at Jackson State struggles against Tennessee State, when you look at, and I say this all the time, you have to have those games to learn a little bit about your team. And this is something that we learned this week is that Jackson State can respond to adversity and win a close, tightly contested, low scoring game. And so I think both teams played a great game, man. Listen, you've got to give Jackson State's defense a shout out, man. 8 sacks, 140 total yards allowed. And this was a learning experience for both teams. And hear me out. If Jackson State goes on to win the SWAC and Tennessee State goes on to win the OVC, both coaches, I guarantee you, will look back to this game as a big learning experience for their team in terms of you know the adversity, the mistakes and things like that, and playing against really quality out of conference opponents. I'm telling you, they're going to look back and say that. And you could tell both coaches, right after the game, but respected each other in terms of that. But listen, Paris, we got to talk about this. Listen, okay, okay, if Grambling does not score a touchdown this week, we're going to start a giveaway, and I'm going to get predictions and let people bet on who is the first team that is going to score on Jackson State this season. Y'all can put it in the chat real quick. In your opinion, who is the first team that is going to score a touchdown against Jackson State in 2022? I need to know. I need to know who you guys think will be the first team to score a touchdown on Jackson State this in 2022, man. But let's get to these last few games, man. I'm gonna get out of here. Campbell, hang on. You think the Campbell game is what, October 15th? You think Jackson State will allow no touchdowns until October 15th? That's crazy. Paris, that is a bold prediction. And Kevin had the same one. Campbell, who was after Valley, Grambling, defense was clutch. Wow. Okay, listen, if Jackson State does not allow a touchdown up until October 15th, that is insane. And this weekend will be an interesting test. I think so if I'm not mistaken, someone asked Hugh Jackson about that today. And so we'll see. Let's see. Grambling will score 2 touchdowns against Jackson State. But man, real quickly, South Dakota State 24-22 over UC Davis. I think South Dakota State was the better team early. And it's just, man, UC Davis hung around in there and brought and really got themselves back in the game. I thought UC Davis played a great game, but man, South Dakota State just had too much firepower to had way too much firepower to escape this game, man. But I think they're missing Tucker Craft, really and truly. But listen, it was a big win for South Dakota State. William and Mary beats Campbell 37-21. We just talked about Jones on the defensive side. That William and Mary offense is a problem. And Campbell played a solid game, man, but I just think William and Mary is on that next level. This was a future CAA conference matchup, but you've got to give a shout out to that William and Mary offense, man. They have been extremely consistent throughout this first part of the season. Now, this is a game I know some people might want to talk about a little bit. North Dakota State beats North Carolina A&T 43-3 in the Fargo Dome. I got to watch the beginning of this game. And man, this game was extremely interesting. Now, the same person who DM'd Scotty DM'd me about the physicality of the offensive line. But listen, you could run the ball. Listen, they ran the ball fine. They had 139 yards rushing for A&T. Tootin had 127 yards rushing, but the passing game was atrocious for North Carolina A&T. They had 50 total yards passing between Zach Yeager and Jalen Fowler. 50 total yards passing and 1 interception. And on top of that, I mean, it was tough. Listen, when it's bad when the fullback, when Hunter Lipke big boyed somebody in the end zone for like on a pass, man, he caught it right on top of his head. And when the fullback is catching passes over the middle, it it's tough, man. It's tough. But listen, A&T didn't play a horrible game. It's just and really and truly North Dakota State didn't look super dominant, but listen, 43-3, they kind of called the dogs off late in that game. So A&T went up there, collected the check, but took a 40-point beat down, man, in that game. Now Montana looked super impressive, 24-7, man. Lucas Johnson again leads the team in passing and rushing, and I'm telling you, Lucas Johnson has Montana looking like a real FCS championship contender, and I would not be surprised if it's a Grizz a Bison matchup in Frisco, Texas this year. The defense is dominant, man. Patrick O'Connell and Justin Ford have been outstanding the first 2 games, and the defensive line has been really, really, really impressive for the Grizz this season, man. So I just wanted to highlight those 4 games. But man, let me get to some of these comments. Hey, Bluebloods, I'm hoping Alcorn can get it together against McNeese. That game is one we're going to talk about, on the preview, but that's a game that Alcorn State has to win, in my opinion. And when I say that, I mean, it's not like a must win for the season, man. That's just a must win for the SWAC. The fact that McNeese has still never lost to a SWAC team is atrocious. I don't understand how that is even a stat that McNeese has never lost to a SWAC team. So Alcorn State win it for the conference, man. I'm really, really hoping they come out there and ball out. They didn't have the best showing against Tulane, man. Aaron Allen did not have a great game, and I really gave them more credit than I guess they deserve going into that one, man. I thought they could at least be competitive against Tulane, but they weren't competitive in the slightest in that game. So I feel bad for Alcorn State, but it's a must win this weekend. UC Davis missed a game-winning field goal. It was close, Ron. Listen, man, I thought South Dakota State was going to run away with this one. I'll be honest with you, Ron. I predicted South Dakota State would win, so I get credit for that, man. But I did not think it was going to be. I did not think it was going to be that close, Ron. I'm gonna be 100 with you. I really didn't. Blue, this game reminded me of the South Carolina State game last year. I feel like JSU would have lost this game last year, but this team was built different and mentally tougher. Great HBC football. I agree, T. I 1,000% agree. We got Grambling Valley, Bama State, Bethune, then Campbell. So Grambling Valley, Bama State, and Bethune are not going to score a touchdown. Paris. That's a prediction. If you're right on that, I'm going to give you a lot of credit. And Cat's just the same team that they used to be. I don't know what it'll take for them to get back to what they were, but I think Mr. Ford is completely wrong on them. I saw that North Dakota State and them boys look good. Jalen Jones is balling. Is Delaware State the minor leagues for Jackson State? It seems like all their stars end up in blue and white. Wilkerson is a beast. Man, Wilkerson plays so good. I don't think that's I don't think that's an understatement, man. He's a baller, and I really, really like his game. And Cat's got Duke this week, does not get any better. And they might not be South Carolina State. South Carolina State looked really, really good last week. Let's see. And Cat's trending downwards. I don't know if Jackson State's played McNeese Paris, but I know all the SWAC teams they have played have not beat them. Pink Scooter Gang will score on them. I think McNeese has beaten the same 2 or 3 teams in all those wins, but I might be wrong. Alcorn almost beat Tulane. It hit the upright. What's the deal with Alcorn's punter? Did he go to Southern? So I heard he was supposed to be eligible this week, but then I got a call right before. It was on Friday night when I was driving to Memphis. I heard he's still not eligible. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on with the punter situation, Jay. But hopefully he'll be back this weekend. If not, We'll see. But I mean, the good part is the backup punter now has 2 weeks of experience. And so hopefully he can be more efficient in terms of his production at the punter spot until the starter gets back. Incat O-line played NDSU's D-line in a way I haven't seen in a while, and the running back for Incat was a monster. I'm not counting Incat out on being a problem in the next few years. I agree with Paris on the touchdown predictions. Their quarterbacks aren't good. Listen, okay, I agree to a point, but I will say if D Davis was fully healthy, Paris, I would give them a slight chance, but it depends on his health. I don't know if he's even going to be back this week. So I'll say this. I don't know if your prediction is completely crazy, but if D Davis is back, I think Alabama State has a chance, but that's a big what if, especially because I don't know what his status is right now. Bethune can barely score against their practice squad. Man, you are out of pocket for that one. What do I do? Miak means? I don't know what that. I just don't see anyone scoring over 7 except maybe Southern. JSU's on a whole different mindset. I'm rolling with Paris. JSU's looking like the 85 Chicago Bears. Blue, please address these comments in the chat about the top FCS teams get paid millions of dollars. Did I miss that comment? No, I don't think anyone gets paid millions of dollars in the playoffs. A lot of teams take a loss. So I mean, there's I think if I was told right, there was like a few teams who have found a way to make it profitable for them, but most of them lose money, man. So no one's getting paid millions. I mean, he's 16-0 against the SWAC. Good Lord, man. Let's see. I hope you're right, but Montana State's top 3 running backs are hurt. Alcorn needs to win that out of conference game for the SWAC. Do you see BC? You see Bethune-Cookman beating FAM? Right now they're going to be competitive. Right now they're going to be really, really competitive, Spence. I think it's so tough, man, because South Carolina State did not look good against Bethune-Cookman did not look good against South Carolina State last week. I think it's going to be competitive. Coming into the season, I thought that was a guaranteed win for FAMU. Right now, Spence, I don't think that is. I want to see how FAMU looks against Alabama A&M, but right now, I think Bethune-Cookman and FAMU are right on par, man, and that could determine who finishes where in that division. Incarnate Word versus India. NDSU is going to win that game, Darren. Yeah, I'm gonna just say that it's definitely NDSU in that matchup. Let's see. Didn't we bet that TSU? I don't think we bet, man. I don't think we bet. But if we did, if you show me the comment where we bet, then I got you. But I don't think I'll bet anything. I did think they were going to score more than 3. But listen, Jackson State's defense played a hell of a game, and I think Coach Prom talked about in the press conference today actually about how impressed he was with Dennis Thurman and how much credit Dennis Thurman should get for this defense. So, listen, I was impressed. You can count me as a believer in the defense now. Now, this Grambling game is going to be extremely interesting, man. If they go out there and they don't score a touchdown, man, I mean, a lot of those SWAC teams are going to be really, really nervous to face Jackson State. A little bit. They really didn't look good against they really didn't look good against Albany State. And I know, people are going to kill me because I don't watch a lot of D2 football. I don't care. I don't care how good of a D2 school Albany State potentially is. FAMU, in my opinion, should not struggle with Albany State, especially at home. And they didn't look good from what I've seen. I haven't got to watch the full game in full length yet, but from what I've seen and what I've read about the game and everything, they did not look great. So I do think FAMU is a little bit overrated. Now, I had them ranked 4th in my preseason HBCU my preseason HBCU rankings, and right now I think you can make an argument they barely belong in the top 10. So I do think FAMU was overrated coming into the season, KJ. And right now, at least, until they prove me otherwise. Let's see. Reginald, the preview is dropping tomorrow, so I got the full Jackson State Grambling preview dropping early for you guys. It'll be dropping tomorrow, so I'll save my thoughts till then. Top 3 teams in the MEAC. North Carolina Central, South Carolina State at 2, and Norfolk State at 3 would be where I would sit it right now. I think Delaware State had too many question marks, especially with the Esias Guthrie transfer. And on top of that, right now I think Morgan's a year or two away. So NCCU at 1, South Carolina State at 2, and Norfolk at 3. I don't think anyone in the SWAC is going to score over 10 points on JSU's defense. Now that's likely. I kind of agree. With that. Man, Wayne, appreciate you becoming a member, man. Guys, if y'all want to be a member, man, link is in the comment with Sean. Appreciate y'all. GSU won't have anything for JSU. First team to score a touchdown on JSU is Grambling. North Carolina Central, South Carolina State. After that is a toss-up. Now, listen, Morgan, it's on its way. I thought they played well against Towson at times, but man, you got to give Wilson a little bit more time to get this team developed. So I think Morgan State's coming, but Central and South Carolina State have a huge lead on this conference, and really and truly, I would not sleep on Central to win the MEAC this year, man. They look so good, and I know they played Winston-Salem State, but they beat them like they were supposed to, 41-0 this weekend. I could see them at 6 or 7. Wait. I mean it's only 5, right? Are you talking about KJ, are you talking about like HBC rankings? If you're talking about HBC rankings, I don't know 6 or 7. Because I think right now it's Jackson State. So the HBCU teams I would rank over FAMU right now: Jackson State, North Carolina Central, South Carolina State, Tennessee State. Oh man, this now we're kind of splitting hairs though. I mean, yeah, maybe 6 or 7. It's just okay. How much stock do y'all put in PV right now? That's the question mark. Is I don't know where to put PV right at this second, this second, because they had a big win over Texas Southern, who I think was a little bit overrated. And then they played a close game with Abilene Christian that they had a chance to out them against Incarnate Word. But I mean, really and truly on the field, PV has looked solid. That defense looks like it's legit. And so, I mean, I think you can make an argument right now on the field that PV potentially belongs over them. Southern belongs over them too. So maybe 7 right now. She said HBC records, I'm being nice. We beat them up and I feel bad. That KJ, I can give you some credit for being nice on that one. Said, man, we put 59 on them. We put 59 on them. So I gotta let's see. The nickel-based defense is giving air raid offenses a ton of trouble. I mean, listen, the more film teams have on Jackson State, I will see if they make any adjustments. But I agree with Mike, man. It's just this is going to be tough. It's going to be tough to compete and beat Jackson State this year. I mean, and I told y'all the biggest threat, in my opinion, was Tennessee State. They win a 16-3, a closely contested game. And I think outside of Southern, maybe Alcorn in conference, I don't know if anyone can hang with them, Bray. I'll be honest. And I think Central would be a very, very interesting matchup in the Celebration Bowl. I'm hoping that happens because I think Central matches up with Jackson State better than South Carolina State does this year. But we'll see, man. I'm hoping Trey Oliver and that coaching staff gets a chance and gets to prove themselves, similar to how Buddy Pugh and that South Carolina State coaching staff did. But we'll see. We'll see how it develops. Central is going to be a problem in the MEAC. I agree. Central, I love Central's game. Richard at quarterback, a problem. Their wide receiving core has multiple guys that can go make plays. Bullock and that offensive line have been just dogs in that front 5. Their defensive line has been able to go out and make plays, and their secondary, led by Codrington, has been a lot better than I expected to be as a group. So I love what Central has right this second. But let me find the comment. This weekend, we're going to find out a lot about Central. New Hampshire is going to be a big game, and it's a huge out of conference matchup for them. If North Carolina Central beats New Hampshire, I agree, Lawrence. Do not sleep on do not sleep on Central going undefeated this year if they beat New Hampshire this weekend. Campbell's going to be a big test too in terms of out of conference, but we just saw what William and Mary did. Did they lay out the blueprint on how to beat Campbell? And we've always seen Campbell has some great moments, but they can't put a full season together. You know, uh, we'll see. We'll see. But Central right now has a great chance to go undefeated if they beat New Hampshire. Stop trying to have a heart. I thought we would know something by week 3, but that might still be too early. That's fair. Let's see. What are you doing your A&M and Valley predictions? Are you talking about the what it's about the games this week? Because I'm not predicting the Valley I'm not predicting the Valley game this week. I think they play Delta State. Definitely not gonna predict that game. I think I'm gonna do a preview on A&M and Austin P, or at least it'll be on my FCS preview this week. That game's gonna be interesting, Sonic Boom. A&M against Austin P is a game that Condo Maynard has to compete in. They have to compete in that. They got to compete in that game. If Austin P goes in there and puts it on them like they did Valley, it is going to look horrible for the out of conference record of the SWAC right now, man. Because right now I think what Alabama State has an FCS win over Howard, and Jackson State has an out of conference win against the OVC with Tennessee State, but everyone else has not looked great. And I mean, this is a game that Alabama A&M has to have. If you go 0-3, I mean, you're looking at 1-2 for FAMU and 0-3 for A&M next week in Bragg, and that game becomes extremely interesting and a must win for both teams. If A&M loses to Austin P like Valley did, Maynard would be looking bad and make the rest of us look bad. I agree. I agree, man. If Austin P beats them 41-0 or something like that, that is terrible. That is absolutely atrocious, man. And I'll be pissed about that. How do we make the FCS playoffs profitable? TV deals, sponsors. Man, the NCAA actually putting resources to the playoffs. Ray, there's a bunch of different ideas. I've thrown a bunch out, but until the NCAA actually cares about FCS football and the programs and these schools making some sort of money, it's never going to be profitable. Even with the minor steps that they've taken over the past few years, you still got to invest in the infrastructure of the playoffs, or it's always going to be a money pit in the playoffs. I'm giving my score prediction. I'm giving my score prediction on Thursday, JM, on the FCS Week 3 preview. That'll be one of the games I talk about. But in terms of matchups, the matchup to watch is going to be the running attack of Alcorn State with Nico Duffy and the Syracuse transfer, and that offensive line against a really stout front seven for McNeese that has some real playmakers, especially on the interior of that front seven. If Alcorn State cannot run the ball, they have no chance. And listen, Golf over at McNeese in his first year coming over from Valdosta State is a very successful coach and is an offensive-minded guy who's going to try to air it out. But the question I have about McNeese is a quarterback battle. Cam Ransom has not really turned out. They have Cadam at the quarterback spot now. He has been very inconsistent, really been prone to turnovers. So this is a great test for the secondary of Alcorn State to get some takeaways and put some points on the board on the defensive side of the ball to help out their offense. And if they can get an early lead, establish the run, and shorten up the game, Alcorn State matches up really well against McNeese State, man. But I'll give my full prediction on the preview for Week 3 on Thursday night. The NCAA treats the FCS playoffs like a stepchild. Agreed on that. Y'all say y'all say what you want about JSU not playing tough out of conference games this year, but we haven't embarrassed the conference either. Now, that is fair. KJ got y'all on that one. KJ got y'all on that one. No embarrassment from Jackson State. SWAC versus FCS out of conference record 3-5. Who's the third win, Lawrence? Am I missing somebody? I'm trying to think who was the other FCS out of conference win. I definitely feel like I'm missing somebody because PV lost to Abilene. Um, Jackson State got a win over Tennessee State. Who am I missing up for that third win, Lawrence? Man, I'm blanking out because Valley lost to Tarleton. Valley lost to Austin P. That was back-to-back losses. Bethune lost to South Carolina State. Uh, FAMU hasn't played any FCS out of conference games. Uh, yeah, Alcorn. Oh, that's right. Yep, Grambling State. Yep, Grambling beat Northwestern State. Yeah, so you're right. Yeah, because Alcorn lost to Stephen F. Austin, Sonnet Boom. So yeah, 3-5 right now, which I mean, I guess is better than previous years, but you got to get some wins this weekend. It's a must win because Incarnate Words beating PV. That's probably almost a guarantee right there. So Alcorn State has to beat McNeese this weekend. That is a must win. And I think PV plays Lamar later in the season, and Lamar is a very, very winnable game for the conference. So that's another game that they're gonna have to win. It's possible if the NCAA stops BSing, they need to find some sponsors and bring in more money. It can be done. They need to sit down with someone like Prom. Definitely like the stream. A&M is going to be 0-3. I like to see Central win the MEAC. They'll be our best representative. South Carolina State's QB1 should be 50-50 because Lily completes 50% of his passes. That's why I think Central is a better matchup for Jackson State. You're not going to beat Jackson State with a quarterback who can't be dynamic and can't throw the football. And Davis Richard is the best quarterback in the MEAC, in my opinion. And they have a defense that I think could be somewhat competitive. And so I think Central would be the best matchup by far in the Celebration Bowl if it's Jackson State at the end. I think right now you can argue that they're the most complete team in the MEAC from top to bottom. So I agree with you, MEAC Mike. Central is my pick right now to make it there. So let's be clear, Tennessee State would have whooped the rest of the swag. Man, listen, Tennessee State, in my opinion, is still a top 5 HBCU this year. They're going to be just fine. Let them get past their money game this weekend. They probably, I don't know, maybe they upset Middle Tennessee State. That would make Jackson State look amazing. Jackson State and Eastern Washington are going to be the biggest fans for Tennessee State this weekend as they go up against Middle Tennessee State. But Tennessee State will be just fine. Let them get into their conference schedule, and then I think we're going to find out how good of a team they are. But I still think they're a top 5 a team in HBCU football right now. I think right now, if I had to give my top 5 teams, I think it'd be Jackson State, Central, Southern. And after that, everyone just kind of falls off. South Carolina State at 4, and then Tennessee State at 5. So those are probably my top 5 teams right now. But I think Tennessee State top to bottom. And listen, when you get 2 losses in competitive games to top 15 programs, man, you got to give them some credit. Both of them away from home, even though I guess that Memphis could be considered a little bit closer to them. But I think that team is going to be just fine once they get into the conference schedule, man. Definitely be a lot better. Undefeated Jackson State, undefeated Central. That game will be a draw. That game will be amazing. Sign me up for that game every day, man. I'm hoping that game happens eventually. We'll see, but got a long season ahead of us, man. But listen, man, we did 2 hours here. Listen, check out the highlights from the game, man. Recorded by yours truly. Also got press conferences from Hugh Jackson and Coach Prime up already from the coaches call today, talking about the upcoming games this weekend. Oh, my bad. Got one caller here. This will be the last caller of the night. 229, you're live. 229, you're live.
Hey, Blue, this is Ray. I was calling because I had put the comment in there about the only defense I've seen to slow down the air raid has been where they've played with either 5 defensive backs, and I've seen some teams play with 6. Do you see teams starting to adopt that to kind of slow down or mitigate the air raid offense?
Yeah, over the past few years, I think that's it started in probably the early 2000s. Gary Patterson was really the guy to make the 3-3-5, 4-2-5 very, very popular. And with this new age of college football coming in, where offenses are spreading out, putting their best athletes on the field. As a defensive coordinator, you want your best athletes on the field. So the days of the 4-3 and things like that just are not there anymore. So for me, I think over the past few years, the 3-3-5 has an obvious deficiency. With the 3-3-5, there's the running lanes are too big, and it allows offensive linemen to work up to the second level too easily because of all that space. So I think you've seen teams really start to emerge running some sort of variation, however they disguise it or whatever, of a 4-2-5, where you still get four down linemen, and what you look at Isaiah Land, look at the kid who was the player of the week from Incarnate Word this week. The defensive ends have become more athletic than they were in the past. That way you still have your best athletes on the field, and it gives you an advantage on the edge to rush the passer. But for me, I'm biased. You should always have four down linemen, because if you have
Yeah,
anything less, you give the other team an advantage in terms of running the football, and that's where you get in trouble. So I do agree with you that that kind of nickel look, whether it's like a 4-2-5 or whatever, is going to be probably the default defense for the future of college football.
yeah, I see that, Blue, the 4-2-5, and it's almost forcing those air raid teams into, hey, I'm not going to let your quarterback beat me. You're going to have to beat me with your running back.
Yeah, I agree. And then also with the three-man front, it's so hard to generate pressure. You have to have a dog at one of those defensive line spots to generate any pressure. And then your nose, if you don't bring any pressure, is going to get double to triple teamed every single play. So it just makes him uh, pointless. And it's really hard to stunt with three defensive linemen unless you bring some sort of creative blitz. And so the 4-2-5, I think, gives you a lot more flexibility than the 3-3-5 does.
Right. Hey, that was it. I just saw that new nickel defense and was thinking like this is going to be the new base defense. Hey, other than that, Blue, hey, have a good one.
Hey, appreciate the call, man. All right, we shut down the
Goodbye.
call line here. But man, listen, I appreciate y'all rocking with me, man, over 2 hours. But like I said, we got press conferences posted. I'm going to post more starting tomorrow morning, man. If there's a coach y'all want to see, man, let me know, and I'll make sure to get that up there, get a clip or whatever y'all want from that. Jackson State, Grambling State preview coming tomorrow. Also going to have the FCS preview on either Wednesday or Thursday night, along with the roundtable. So stay tuned for updates on that. And if there's a game you want us to cover, player, anything like that, man, hit us up on social media, hit me up in the comments, and I'll make sure to talk about that game, player, team, whatever you guys want to talk about, man. But I appreciate the support. I mean, we've gained so many subscribers, viewers, views over the past few weeks, man. So could not do it without you guys. But listen, live streams coming later this week. Grambling Jackson State preview tomorrow. But until next time, the Blue Bloods are out.